welcome back to our closing session, which I found actually the most exciting session, but you will see yourself, because I hope we're going to have like a challenging panel and not a panel where we all agree. So the aim is to go out still being friends, but at the same time to maybe go to the hard part, because we are talking in this panel today about challenges versus opportunities for the development of Africa. And for this I can welcome again Dr. Kinfu, then Mr. Ceesay and Mr. Mhango. This is wrong, right? Now you can all make fun of my wrong pronunciation. And the last one I can properly pronounce, Dr. Jonas Ecke. You haven't seen him before, but now he's sitting here. This is because he is actually kind of an expert on Africa. He has been in so many different places in Africa. He is a cultural anthropologist, advising on development, and he also has his PhD in cultural anthropology. I'm going to start with him because we have not heard from him. And then I'm going to pose a question and hope there's going to be a lively discussion. So, Jonas, you have seen the last couple talks here. What for you would be the three important challenges Africa faces, and where, from like an outsider's view, do you see opportunities?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Actually, should I take this? Here we go. Yeah, well, I would have to say there are, first of all, a lot of opportunities on the African continent, because it's a youthful continent. It's a place where people on a daily basis show great creativity to make the best of their life's circumstances and to build societies. And also, I think Africans are the most hardworking people in the world. You know, it's people working very hard to push the continent forward. Well, personally, when I think about challenges, I think a great challenge is industrialization. I'm originally actually informed by Mamo Muchi, who's actually a scholar from Ethiopia, with whom I took my graduate degree, and he always emphasized the world system theory, where raw materials come out of Africa, additional value through manufacturing is added outside, and Africans get a bad deal, even though it's actually the minerals, the copper, the timber, the rubber, it's all theirs. So this is a challenge, I think, that's immense. Personally, I think if we look at the economic rise of the West and Asian countries that have come from immense deprivation until recently, we've seen countries putting in place protectionist measures and also building state capacities, having the state involved in building value. And I think from the outside, countries didn't really want that for Africa. And it's on African leaders to do what Asia did, what Germany did during the Bismarck era, or what France did during mercantilism, or what the US did when they electrified the West, or what China did with their state-run enterprises, or Malaysia. I think another challenge also is the issue of security. As we know, war is really wrecking economies and livelihoods. I think that generally speaking, the outside countries haven't always been great for African security, to put it mildly. For example, when France and the United States began tackling terrorism, during that time, for multiple reasons, terrorism increased 75,000%. And I mean, that's a disastrous legacy. now in some countries, Russia comes in. I don't think that that's going to be much better, and we already see a lot of abuses. In the north of the continent, the European Union tailors its policies towards stopping migration, and I think all of that is not really in the interest of Africans. And yeah, I see a lot of challenges in terms of African leaders being able to organize security in a way that's not dictated by outside forces.
Thank you very much. What would one of you like to add something, correct something, revise?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. From what he said, I think that is one of the issues affecting Africa, and it will affect Africa until and unless we see a way forward to look within our own selves to make sure we have measures that are going to be beneficial to African only. Because any external partner that is coming in will look into his benefit first, and the benefit of his organization or business will supersede the benefit of the country. And the only thing they put forward is the image that they want to display or that they want you to understand. At the end of the day, when they are given a chance to go into that, into any business, they exploit you, exploit your citizen, and exploit the natural resources you have. At the end of the day, you will end up having nothing. You will not have anything but to rely on them for loans and others to finance your budget, which is going to be a problem for Africa. Because in terms of security, we are lacking, and then it is affecting African economy deeply. We have to look into that, and we are using the politicians and the leaders are using only youth for. Youth should be used in terms of economic development, entrepreneurship, and issues that are going to be beneficial for African economy, but they are not using as that.
We earlier talked about different paths, right? Paths to development, and the question if it even makes sense for African countries to go the same development paths other African countries have done or other countries in the world have gone. Given that we are going to cope with a world that probably has, and I now openly say it, 3 degrees of warming. We are currently on a 3 or 4 degrees of warming path. And although the burden of doing something about it should be on the profiters, right? Polluters pays would be a justice approach. But we know that, and particularly many African countries see, that the global north is not willing to do anything about it. So I feel like one of the main challenges today is climate change adaptation, given that there is no action, right? There's no action, we are on a path of 3 degrees. So I'm wondering, how do you think African countries could revise a path or actually go a different path, a smarter path than many countries before that are now stuck in this hyper-industrialized world where they're utterly dependent on resources we are maybe not going to get in the future? I know that this was an evil question.
For me?
Yeah, for you.
Thank
we
you.
should take it.
Thank you. I think the main problem of Africa is no understanding each other. That's the best, the central question. We didn't understanding in one country, in one region, and all Africans, because the problem of, you remember 30 years ago, what happened in Rwanda. That's the problem of understanding. It was in 1 year they killed 1 million people. That's history. But this problem is going to all African countries, no understanding each other. The same problem is no understanding with politics. We don't have political party in Africa. Why they going to coup d'etat by army? Because they are a big institute in Africa, only armies, they have discipline, they are going to. It's not new political culture, this political culture is going to from 1960s, 70, when they for freedom fighting. There was the same colonels, generals, that's army. Still, from Egypt to all African countries, their leader, who is he? That is army leader. I don't think that the problem is only Francophone country now, coup d'etat coming, is going to in Africa because no understanding each other. I said, if we looking to Europa, they have the rule, they have the system, they are working constitution system, they are working legal system. In Africa, we don't have this system. That, I said, the main problem is that it's not understanding in Africa.
Can I add something?
1 second, because I want to address a question actually. So we are talking Africa, right? But we are also talking more than 54 countries to be counted, probably to be more. And we already had a talk today that said we are okay with our neighbors. So do you have like some disagreement with saying that this is the main challenge, that Africans can't cooperate or do not cooperate with each other?
I wouldn't really. I think we also need to critically look at the flip side of the coin also. Because when I look at the major conflicts that are in Africa today, I see two types of conflicts. It's brothers against brothers in the same country.
Mhm.
It's also, I don't know whether to consider coups that are happening in Africa as conflict, but I could say yes to some extent. So what are the major drivers for these in-country conflicts that we see in Africa? If you look at that, you find that basically these are stemming from what I would call these huge inequality gaps that exist between the rich and the poor. And the other thing that I've seen in Africa, like in the DRC, for example, in Mozambique, Cabo Delgado area, is because natural resources that build the country are predominantly in minority areas. And because of that, people in those minority areas begin to think that they're not benefiting enough from that. And then, you know, the African politics is hugely ethnocentric, which also means that trust within tribes or ethnic groups within the country is a big challenge that has led to what other people call othering. For instance, in the Cabo Delgado region in Mozambique, it's because this is an oil-rich area. But if you go back to their history, you find that these are people that way back used to be suppressed, and now they begin to be recognized just because Total has gone there investing a lot of money, and they're saying we haven't benefited from this kind of arrangement in the past. So these are some of the things that really militate against progress in Africa. You might find it very stunning that about $18 billion is lost every year due to conflicts in Africa. And if you put these funds together, they could finance 2 or 3 countries in Africa in terms of annual budget. Add to the same the element of resource case that I was talking about, which is kind of fueling wars. So yes, conflicts, country to country conflicts, I don't really see them in Africa, but I see challenges that are coming in because one area feels shortchanged because they think they're not benefiting enough. So there's lack of trust within the country. We can draw lessons from countries like where I see separation of powers, rule of law, like Botswana. A small country like Malawi, where the judiciary is very independent, they were able even to challenge the election where the incumbent had to lose the case, which is unprecedented in Africa. So maybe we need to start making sure that our our institutions become more vibrant, separation of power is identified and claimed. I'm a very passionate person when it comes to the issues of demographic dividend. I lived in Uganda. In Uganda, you're not going to see any billboard of Museveni. But Museveni has these young people that they call border borders. And these young guys use bikes. And if you look at each one of them, 2 million of them, they're supporting their families with these bikes. But those are Museveni boys. They don't even respect the law. You touch them, you have touched the raw nerve of somebody else. So in kind of those situations, governance or law enforcement institutions begin not to perform, and that can also contribute to escalation of, civil strife in the country.
I'm gonna address something to you, and then you can like wrap it inside of it. So while Happy is talking, like I would think of like Sudan and Ethiopia as one of those wars where we have like proxies, right? We have lots of engagement. We have Saudi Arabia interfering. We have Russia interfering. So a long time ago, I learned in development anthropology that Africa would be way better off if we just took our hands off and let people live and let people develop. So I was reminded when you were saying this about Sudan and all the proxy wars. But what is the solution? Like, Jonas? Now this is a super difficult question, and also after you to all the others. Do you see any solution? Like, how are we going to like cut the connection? How are we making sure that because of the natural resources, we don't have other powers to come and basically they just give weapons and want money, and they don't care about any human population and any human cost the conflicts actually cause?
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting question about the outside powers. Sometimes, you mentioned Museveni, he still receives a lot of assistance from Western countries, including military assistance. And a lot of the recent coup plotters have actually been, at some point, trained by the United States. I think what I wonder about is, like, I think as a European, I should look at, our side of the problem, our contribution to these conflicts. But is looking at outsiders a productive way of looking at it? I would be curious about your opinion. I think, these colonial rules, they were mostly like, these were military regimes, and then the Cold War, it became very difficult to get away from that. And now we have like all these other security dynamics. How do you look at that? How do you look at the issues of outside powers? So I guess I'm just asking the same question.
If you want me to attempt to answer this question, I think one thing that we really need to agree here is we live in a global village where you wouldn't really say issues in one country may not spill over to the other. This will always be there. But I think it's also about respecting institutions, sub-regional, as well as maybe in-country institutions. I had a chance to work with the African Union on some project under the African Commission. And one thing that I saw was even the African Commission itself, within the African Commission, there's less trust among leaders themselves. They only agree on issues that have to do with consolidating their stay in power. But I think if they came together with one voice on really substantive issues affecting Africa, they should have probably gained their space even in the UN that allows them to speak as a voice and then gain recognition from other institutions. I see that. But where it is now, I think it's a question of what is happening right now is where each country, apart from speaking as a region, then they go behind, the back door, and they also want to make sure that only what they want is being done. So it's making the institution a little bit more robust could, I think, help. I've also seen, I don't know if it's the right time to also link the same to climate change. Yes or no?
Go ahead. You're the panelist. I'm only moderating.
Also, stunningly, it is predicted that it should global atmospheric temperatures go to about 2.2 degrees Celsius, maybe by 2050 or so. We expect Africa to lose close to 290 billion, dollars, which is a huge chunk when you look at the African economies. And this loss, it means if you have, let's say, climate-induced shocks, they create poverty, lack of infrastructure, and that makes people within the country rise, if you understand what I mean. But then you go to where decisions are made, like that the Conference of Parties, the COPs, climate change financing, and all those other things. Decisions are not being made. No support is being given to that. So you might find that at the end of the day, instead of African countries focusing on how do they come together to deal with global challenges that are there, how to not to kind of bargain for African chunk, they are busy dealing with internal issues of hunger, displacement, and all that stuff. So there are a lot of factors that distract them from focusing on some other issues that could make Africa gain its recognition as a global player when it comes to global issues.
I'm going to ask you something in a second. But when we look at this calculation that if 2 degrees are reached, right, then this is the economic calculation. And we have to remind ourselves that this is economists speculating. Okay, so all numbers we hear, the real human cost is much higher, and the human life is like insane. If we look at already people dying from hunger, already desertification going a long way. So it's probably trillions that are lost if we stick to 2 degrees. But we are not on the 2 degree path, right? We are on the 3 degree path. And what is happening is that those are profiting, they do divide and conquer, right? It's just like neo-colonialism on steroids kind of thing, where they come now and they have talking about green hydropower. Germany talks about green hydropower. Where do they want to get it from? From Africa, right? Instead of letting people develop, now green hydropower, they want it to go to Germany so they can have some nice statistics. But I found it very interesting, we had this matter of trust. So there you both actually kind of agree that trust is missing. So as a general secretary of the model UN, I wonder if you have some ideas of how are we going to build trust, or not how are we going to build trust, but how is everybody going to build trust? Because if we talk pure numbers, Africans are going to be more than anybody, right? So even by human power, Africa is on the rise. But how are we going to translate this human capital into power by actually building trust?
Thank you. As a youngster growing and then experiencing what is happening globally and within the context of Africa, I see the potential for African to come together, because it's just like when you are misinformed, you misbehave. It's like misinformation is what is making everything difficult for us to come together, have a dialogue that is going to be beneficial for all of us. Because when you don't know actually what is happening, for you to prevent that, it is going to be a problem for you. These numbers he said is a number that predicts what is going to happen in next few years' time. What can we do? It is not going to affect only one country. It is not going to affect only one individual. It is going to affect the whole of Africa. and whatever affect Africa will affect the whole globe, because it's like the world is now a global village. Everyone is connected one way or the other. Even climate change issues that we are discussing, it's not only Africa that is that is facing the challenges. Though the more challenges are in Africa, because when it comes to drought and displacement of people is mainly in Africa. You see countries, people are moving, hunger is killing everyone. When general food, the food sufficient we have in the world, if it is distributed equally, we can all have at least a bit. But it's like 7 million people are always going to bed with hunger every day. So how can we tackle all those things? It means those who are not in the verge of coming together to make sure we have a dialogue that is going to build trust, and also see that we are all focusing on something that is not going to be beneficial for only one person, but all of us. Any problem that you see yourself within, you try to look for the solution better. But any problem that you see that you are not part of the solution, you are not part of the problem, it means you don't care about that. That is human nature. But this is affecting all of us, not only individual. That can serve as a base for us to come together, build the trust that is necessary to make sure we have a focus that is going to generate the best thing that we have, and then it is not going to affect anyone in future. We are going to tackle the problem.
You kind of have a grim idea of human nature, that if you're not affected, you're not interested. That is quite a grim view of human nature. I hope it's different. I believe in allyship. We see it everywhere, right? We see it hopefully today all men also standing up for women's rights, because that would be allyship. And yes, we can agree we're all victims of patriarchy, or at least most of us. But I hope there's a chance for also people that are not affected to take care. What you can think about is also, like, in psychology, it's shown that poor people are actually more likely to help each other, that the more economic wealth you're growing, the less charitable people become, and the more they think they deserve it by themselves, and the less they forget that getting out of poverty is a community effort, and not something an individual typically does, right? So I think those things are very important. But before we go and eat, I still want to for instance, Tigray is all the time on my mind. I don't know if you know about Tigray. In 2022, they say about 500,000 people were massacred. 500,000 people, right? And what did we see on the news? Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Well, now I'm talking about Sudan. What do we see on the news? Maybe sometimes Sudan, because it's about Russia is involved, right? But now we see on the news Gaza and Israel. And so my question I want to ask is, how are we going to, or if you have any answers to, how are we going to create a more equal world, also in paying attention? Because paying attention is a part of respect, right? It's a part of acknowledgement. So do you have any ideas? Maybe I'm going to start with you. Do you have any ideas? How are we going to find a place where we actually take care, where we actually think every human life cost is equal, where we don't focus all our attention, and especially in with all the apps and so on one conflict, but see the human suffering everywhere?
Let me back to the situation of today in Africa. I want to look the influence of foreigner. I think the influence of Africa now, stadium, football stadium, where we playing the old player and new player. The old, that is European, who colonized Africans. The new China, Turkish, the same. Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, India, the same. This new player, this in Africa. The same institution like MVF, financial structure system American, and all system of grant or banking system working in Africa. This inflation, the same Russia is no new player now in Africa. You know, you have information. No, yeah, it was Soviet Union, now Russia. That is new. The problem is the new player or old players, they are competition each other in the stadium of Africa. The Africans, they didn't understanding why they doing, what is the futurity. It will be conflict, they categorize with China or with the US. We already dividing, our intelligence is already dividing. Somebody is going to asking, give me, yeah, I understand. Money system is from, they want to go out from neo-colonialism system, but they didn't understand new. Our new, I said for our new position, it must be understanding each other and forming our new rule, new system. Not copy European system. If you formulate our each system, maybe we starting develop. If I answer.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I mean, I would actually agree with everything the speaker before me said. I think there's, you know, there, also what you said, there are like strong divisions, and it's like a fertile ground sometimes for outsiders, but also, you know, insiders to cause chaos. But I'm overall very, still very optimistic about the African continent. I mean, it's a lot of different places, but they have a similar historical experience. I always like the saying by Gramsci, which is optimism of the, what was it? Optimism of the will?
Yeah.
But pessimism of the intellect. You know, we have to see how things are, but then we still have to be optimistic to change something. And we're all our, brothers and sisters keepers. And so if that's something that Africans will do, will internalize, then there'll be less division. And if we see Africans as brothers and sisters, we would have a world of more solidarity. So it's something we can all work on, maybe through cultural diplomacy.
Yeah, thank you. I think from the, I'll take your approach now of theories. I think from the classical theories, we know that we operate in a world of anarchy, where you need to earn your space. And by earning your space, it means you have to show that you matter also, so for you to be recognized. So this is perhaps that I would want to see happening in Africa, because this thing of saying, it's because of the West, this and that, maybe it's high time we also started doing like serious self-reflection to say, how did South Korea manage? How did Singapore do it? How did China do it? If you look at these countries, they used to be bullied in the past. But this time, these Western countries, if there was something happening next to closer to Korea, which was threatening the global supply chains, they would say, no, this should be an issue of concern to us. And Africa is lucky because what I see today, a lot of forums that I go to, the Africa-Germany investment forum in Frankfurt, the energy forum, the agriculture forums that we go to attend to, everybody's saying Africa is the future. I'm going to tell you something. Every year, you have these like Africa Germany summit, Africa USA summit. People have seen that we cannot do without Africa in terms of global economics. So it's high time that African leaders and citizens also, it's not just about leaders, but citizens, the private sector coming together to say, you know what? We should begin to develop the capacity that we become the people bullying other people, so that other people go like, without Africa, we are finished. I think this is the way to go, because in the rule of the jungle, if you remain timid, you remain timid. Somebody else is gonna capitalize on that. So answering your question, if it's about how does Africa begin to be recognized, coming up with a voice, I would say, make sure you become united. It was very, I don't know if you heard about Eswatini resolution, where the African Union sat in Swaziland and said, we want to have at least 2 permanent seats at the Security Council. That was a good beginning. And how would you do that? Say, okay, if this is not being taken heed of, we're gonna come up with other means which shows that we can pull out. Lucky we now have this multipolar geopolitical world, which gives them some kind of leverage for them to express their voice. I would say, yeah.
I like this as a final word. I'm going to add an example where I was like, I'm not sure if it was Ivory Coast or Ghana, but one of them showed Switzerland the finger, because it was about chocolate, and the country, Ghana. Okay, it was Ghana. So Ghana decided to not export just the chocolate, and now we're back to Wallerstein's world system theory and the exploitation of resources, right? And maybe with chocolate it's easier because it's not that hard to produce chocolate out of chocolate beans in comparison to maybe other technologies. But I think, like, for me, it was a wonderful moment. Maybe also my leftist heart lit up when I saw Ghana saying, oh no Switzerland, we're not doing it anymore. We are going to add the value, and we are going to benefit from our chocolate beans. And I don't know, do you agree that this is an example of like how Africa was not bullied, but how they took their end? We have these resources, and we are going to decide what we do with these resources and not be exploited anymore.
Absolutely, it's what you see with OPEC countries. Because when OPEC says, if you don't do this, we're not going to give you oil, everybody listens.
Okay, so thank you very much for this, and thank you everybody to having all the attention today. I know it's got late, so thank you to the panel. Thank you to the people that work here, who currently is nobody here except me.
Thank you to ICD.
Thank you to the students.
Thank you to you, Doctor.